The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council floated in the darkness of neutral space. It was a massive station, built to hold representatives from 47 different species. Today, like every other session day, the chamber was full of noise. Aliens of all shapes and sizes talked, argued, and made deals in the curved rows of seats that rose like a stadium around the central speaking platform. High Arbiter Velos stood at the center. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the lights above. His Vor eyes scanned the room with the confidence of someone who had led the council for 30 years. He raised one long hand, and the chamber slowly fell silent. "We begin today's session," Velos announced, his voice carrying to every corner. "Let the record show that all member species are present and accounted for." A small administrative drone floated near him and made a soft beeping sound. Velos looked at it with annoyance. "Correction," the drone said in its flat voice. "Earth's delegation is absent. Their seat is empty." A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. Velos looked toward the section where humans usually sat. The chairs were indeed empty. Not just empty, they looked like they had been empty for a while. No personal items. No data pads. Nothing. Velos made a sound that was something like a laugh. "It seems our youngest members have decided to sleep in today. How very human of them." Several delegates laughed. The Drath representative, a heavy-set creature with dark red scales, slapped his knee in amusement. Trade Minister Drow, who sat in the economic section, smiled with satisfaction. He had never liked dealing with humans. They asked too many questions and wanted too many fair terms, but not everyone laughed. Ambassador Kira of the North Federation sat very still in her seat. She was humanoid in shape, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that missed nothing. She stared at the empty human section with a feeling she could not name. It sat in her chest like a cold stone. She remembered her last conversation with Taiho, Earth's ambassador, 3 months ago. They had met in a quiet corridor after a session where, once again, a human proposal had been dismissed without real discussion. It had been a proposal about preparing for possible attacks from the Draft Syndicate, a group of pirates and raiders that was growing stronger every year. Taiho had looked tired that day. Not the normal tired of a busy diplomat, something deeper. His dark eyes had carried a heaviness that Kira found disturbing. "Can I ask you something, Kira?" He had said. "Of course. What would you do if no one listened? No matter how loud you spoke. No matter how right you were, what would you do if you realized that your voice simply did not matter to them?" Kira had not known how to answer. She had said something about patience and persistence. Taiho had smiled sadly, thanked her for her friendship, and walked away. She had not seen him since far from the council. On the edge of the Sol system, a small diplomatic station orbited in silence. Inside, Taiho sat in his office. The room was nearly empty now. The pictures were gone from the walls. The books were packed. Only his desk remained, and on it lay a single document. Yuna stood by the window, looking out at the stars. She was younger than Taiho, sharp and brilliant, and she had served as his chief advisor for 10 years. She had seen this moment coming for a long time. "The last ship left this morning," she said quietly. "All personnel have returned to Earth. The research teams, the medical volunteers, the trade liaisons, everyone." Taiho nodded slowly. "And the joint projects?" "Ended. Our contributions have been removed. The data we shared has been archived on our side only. We left nothing behind. The humanitarian aid stations? Closed. Our ships came home." Taiho picked up the document on his desk. It was sure only 1 page. At the top, it read, "Notice of withdrawal from the Galactic Council." Below that were just a few lines. No explanation. No list of grievances. No demands or threats. Just a simple statement that Earth was leaving, effective immediately. "They won't understand," Yuna said, turning from the window. They'll think we're throwing a tantrum. They'll laugh at us. I know. Doesn't that bother you? Taiho was quiet for a moment. He thought about the 50 years humanity had spent in the council. 50 years of being called the young species. 50 years of being patted on the head and told to wait their turn. 50 years of proposals ignored, warnings dismissed, and contributions forgotten. They never wanted to understand us, he finally said. We were convenient to them, useful. We gave them medicine, technology, art, and ideas. We protected their trade routes and saved their colonies from disasters. And in return, they treated us like children who should be grateful to sit at the adult table. He set the document down. You cannot make someone respect you, Yuna. You cannot force someone to see your worth. They have to choose to. And they never did. The door opened and Commander Minho stepped in. He was a solid man with gray at his temples and the calm presence of someone who had seen both war and peace. He commanded Earth's frontier fleet, and for the past 6 months, he had overseen the quiet withdrawal of every human ship and station from Council space. It's done, Minho reported. We're completely out. No human presence remains in any Council system. Any problems? Taiho asked. None. They didn't even notice. Most of the stations we maintained, they had no idea we were running them. They'll find out soon enough. Yuna shook her head. 50 years, and they never once asked who kept the lights on. Taiho stood and walked to the window. Earth hung in the distance, blue and green and beautiful. Home. Send the notice, he said. Minho nodded and left. Back in the Grand Chamber, the session continued without concern. Valos made jokes about humans and their emotional nature. Drawl proposed new trade restrictions that would have affected. Earth then laughed when he realized there was no one to argue against them. Then a message arrived. Council Administrator walked to Velos and handed him a datapad. Velos read it, and for a moment, his silver face showed surprise. Then he smiled with amusement. It seems Earth has officially withdrawn from the Galactic Council, he announced. No reason given, just a notice that they are leaving. The chamber erupted in laughter and mocking comments. Good riddance, someone shouted. Let the children go home, said another. Drow clapped his heavy hands together. Finally, no more humans demanding fair treatment. No more boring proposals about preparation and cooperation. Only Kira did not laugh. She stared at the empty chairs where Taiho used to sit. She thought about his question. What would you do if no one listened? Now she knew the answer. You would stop speaking. You would simply walk away. And you would let the silence say what words never could. The laughter continued around her. But Kira felt only cold dread. Because she understood something the others did not. Humans never did anything without reason. And if they had chosen silence, it meant they had nothing left to say to those who had refused to hear them. The galaxy had just lost something precious. And no one in that chamber, except for her, had any idea. 3 months passed since humanity walked away. The Galactic Council continued as if nothing had changed. Sessions were held. Laws were passed. Trade agreements were signed. The empty human chairs gathered dust, and no one seemed to care. But small things began to go wrong. It started on a medical station in the Outer Rim. Dr. Velis, a North physician, stared at her supply inventory with growing panic. The enzyme treatments she needed for her patients were running out. These were special medicines created from plants and animals found only on Earth. For decades, humans have provided them freely to stations across the galaxy. Where is the new shipment? She demanded of her assistant. There is no shipment, the assistant replied nervously. Earth has stopped all exports. We have 3 weeks of supply left. After that, he could not finish the sentence. Dr. Velis contacted the Council's medical division. They told her to find alternative sources. But there were no alternatives. Earth's biology was unique. The medicines could not be made anywhere else. Across the galaxy, 17 different trade routes began to experience delays. Ships arrived late. Cargo went missing. Schedules fell apart. Trade Minister Drell investigated with annoyance. He expected to find lazy workers or corrupt officials. Instead, he found a shocking truth. Human logistics vessels had been maintaining these routes for years. They had done it so quietly, so efficiently, that no one even knew. The human ships had plotted the courses, managed the schedules, and solved problems before anyone noticed them. Now those ships were gone, and no one knew how to do what they had done. "This is ridiculous," Drell muttered, looking at the chaos spreading across his reports. How did we become so dependent on them without realizing it? He sent a request to Earth asking them to resume logistics support. The request was politely declined. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a simple no. On a research station near a dying star, a team of alien scientists faced a different crisis. They had been working on a dark matter project for 15 years. It was supposed to revolutionize energy production across the galaxy. Human scientists has been part of the team since the beginning. Now those humans were gone. And so were their notes. "We cannot continue," the lead researcher told the Council's Science Division. The theoretical framework was built by the human team. "We understood parts of it, but the complete picture only they had that. Their work is gone. The equations are incomplete. We have to start over." 15 years of work lost. Because no one had thought to truly understand what the humans were doing. They had been too busy taking credit for the project to notice who was actually making it succeed. Kira watched these problems pile up with a sick feeling in her stomach. She had tried to warn the Council, but no one listened. They blamed the problems on bad luck, temporary setbacks, anything but the obvious truth. She went to find Aura, the Council's historian. Aura was old even by galactic standards, with faded yellow skin and eyes that had seen centuries pass. She spent her days in the archives, surrounded by records that most people had forgotten existed. "I need your help," Kira said. "I need to see everything related to humanity. Every proposal they made. Every complaint they filed. Everything." Aura studied her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I think we made a terrible mistake. And I need to understand how." Aura led her deep into the archives. There, in dusty digital files that no one had opened in years, Kira found the truth. Humanity had not been silent. They had spoken constantly. For 50 years, they had filed formal proposals, warnings, and requests. Hundreds of them. 10 years ago, they had warned about the Drath Syndicate. They had provided intelligence showing that the Drath were building a fleet, recruiting members, and preparing for large-scale attacks. They had proposed a joint defense initiative. The proposal had been tabled and never discussed again. 8 years ago, they had submitted a pandemic preparedness plan. They had noticed dangerous gaps in the galaxy's medical response systems. They offered to help build better infrastructure. The plan was marked as not a priority and filed away. 5 years ago, they had requested fair voting representation. Despite their contributions, humans had only one vote in the Council, the same as species that contributed nothing. They asked for a system where votes reflected actual participation. The request was rejected in less than an hour. Kira read file after file, her horror growing with each one. Proposals for environmental protection. Warnings about economic vulnerabilities. Offers to share technology. Requests for cultural exchanges. Plans to improve refugee systems. All ignored. All dismissed. All forgotten. They weren't silent, Ara said quietly, watching Kira's face. They spoke for 50 years. We just never listened. Kira felt tears forming in her eyes. She thought of Taiho, standing alone in that corridor. asking what you should do when no one hears you. Now she understood. He had already known the answer. He had already made his choice. She tried to contact him through back channels. She sent a personal message, begging for a conversation. Days later, a response came. It was not from Taiho. It was from Yuna. Ambassador Taiho thanks you for your friendship over the years. He remembers your kindness fondly. However, Earth has nothing more to say to the Galactic Council. We wish you well. That was all. Polite. Final. Closed. Kira sat alone in her quarters that night, reading the message over and over. She had been one of the few who treated humans with respect. But even she had not truly seen them. Even she had not fought hard enough when their proposals were dismissed. Even she had stayed silent when she should have spoken. And now it was too late. 2 weeks later, the Drath Syndicate attacked. That had happened exactly as humanity had predicted 4 years earlier. A fleet of Drath warships appeared at the edge of Council space and struck a colony world called Varam Prime. The colony had no real defenses. Why would it? The Council had always believed the Drath were just small-time raiders, not a serious threat. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Varan Prime was burning. Thousands were dead. Thousands more were taken as slaves. The Drath sent a message to the Council. This is only the beginning. Emergency sessions were called. Delegates screamed at each other, demanding action. But action required coordination. Coordination required communication systems. And the best communication systems in the galaxy had been the quantum networks that humans had built and maintained. Those networks were dark now. Velo stood at the center of the chaos, his silver face pale. For the first time in 30 years, he looked uncertain. He called for human assistance. A message was sent to Earth requesting emergency support. The response came quickly. Earth is no longer a member of the Galactic Council. We have no obligation to respond to Council requests. We hope you find the strength to solve your own problems. Drawl slammed his fist on his desk when he read it. They cannot do this. We need them. But they could do it. And they had. Kira stood by the window of her quarters, watching ships scramble in panic disorder outside. She thought about all the times she had seen Taiho sit quietly while others mocked his people. She thought about his patience, his dignity, his endless willingness to try again. And she thought about the moment that patience finally ended. Humanity had not left in anger. They had left in sorrow. They had given everything they had for 50 years and received nothing but contempt in return. And finally, they had decided that their gifts deserved to go to those who valued them. The galaxy was about to learn what it had lost. And Kira feared that by the time they understood, it would be far too late to get it back. 6 months after humanity's departure, the galaxy was burning. The Drath Syndicate had attacked 4 more colonies. Each attack was worse than the last. They had learned that the Council was weak, slow, and disorganized. They smelled blood, and they wanted more. The Council's military response was a disaster. Ships arrived at the wrong places at the wrong times. Orders got confused. Supplies went missing. Fleets that should have worked together instead stumbled over each other like blind creatures in the dark. The reason was simple. The communication networks were gone. For decades, humanity had built and maintained a web of quantum-linked systems that connected every corner of Council space. These networks allowed instant communication across impossible distances. They had made coordination possible. They had made the galaxy feel smaller and safer. Humans had shared these networks freely. They had never asked for payment or recognition. They had simply built them because they believed in connection, in bringing people together. Now those networks were silent. The hardware still existed, but the human engineers who understood it were gone. Alien technicians tried to operate the systems, but they could not figure out the complex designs. It was like trying to play a musical instrument without ever having learned music. High Arbiter Velos called an emergency session of the council. For the first time in anyone's memory, he looked afraid. The grand chamber was tense. Delegates whispered to each other with worried faces. The usual confidence and arrogance had faded. Reality had arrived, and it was Harsh.Dr. all stood to present his economic report. His hands were shaking slightly. "The galactic economy is in serious trouble," he announced. Human trade goods made up a larger part of our daily life than we realized. Their food products, their medicines, their entertainment, their technology, we depended on these things without knowing it. He showed charts and numbers. Agricultural worlds that had relied on human farming equipment were struggling to maintain their harvests. Hospitals were running low on treatments that only Earth could produce. Entertainment networks had lost huge amounts of content because human artists and creators had pulled their work. "We are facing shortages on 312 worlds," Droll said quietly. "Unrest is growing. People are scared and angry. They want to know why things have gotten so bad." A delegate from a small species stood up. "Why can't we just make these things ourselves? We are advanced civilizations." Droll shook his head. "We could, eventually. But it would take years to develop the knowledge and infrastructure. Humans had centuries of development in their biological sciences, their agricultural methods, their creative industries. We cannot replace 50 years of contributions in a few months." The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence, but it was the small things that hurt the most. Things no one had thought to measure or record. On dozens of worlds, festivals felt empty. Human musicians had always been willing to perform, to share their songs and stories. Now those stages were dark. Schools noticed that their exchange programs had ended. Human teachers had volunteered across the galaxy, teaching everything from mathematics to painting. Children asked where their favorite teachers had gone. Libraries discovered gaps in their collections. Human writers had contributed thousands of books, poems, and stories. Much of that work had been pulled when humanity left. There was a strange emptiness spreading through the galaxy. It was hard to describe. Like walking into a room where something important was missing, but you could not remember what. Kira stood and addressed the council. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. "I have something to show you all," she said. "Something that should have been shown years ago." She activated a display screen and began reading from the files Aura had helped her find. She read humanity's warnings about the Dras Syndicate, written 4 years before the attacks began. She read their proposals for defense cooperation, for mutual aid agreements, for emergency response systems. She read their requests for respect, their pleas to be treated as equals, their patient, dignified appeals for basic fairness. The chamber was completely silent. "They told us everything," Kira said, her voice heavy with emotion. "They warned us about the Drath. They offered to help us prepare. They begged us to listen. And we treated them like children playing at being adults." She looked directly at Velos. "We laughed at them. We ignored them. We took everything they gave and offered nothing in return. And now we wonder why they left." Velos tried to speak, but Kira cut him off. "They didn't leave in anger. That's what makes this so much worse. They left in sorrow. They left because they finally understood that we would never see them as equals. No matter how much they gave, no matter how many times they saved us, we would always see them as less than us." She turned to face the entire chamber. "And now look at us, falling apart because we never learned to do what they did for us, dying because we ignored their warnings, suffering because we could not be bothered to say thank you." Far from the council on Earth, a young woman named Hana sat in a quiet office. She had spent 3 years compiling a report on humanity's contributions to the galaxy. It was finally complete. Taiho and Yuna sat across from her, waiting. Hana opened the report and began to read. Over 50 years, humanity had saved the lives of approximately 2.3 billion beings across the galaxy through medical aid. They had prevented 4 major famines through food assistance. They had helped develop technologies that improved life on hundreds of worlds. They had created art that brought joy to countless people. None of it had ever been officially acknowledged by the Council. Not once. Should we have stayed? Hannah asked when she finished. Should we have kept trying? Taiho was quiet for a long moment. He looked tired, but at peace. There is an old saying on Earth, he finally said. You cannot pour from an empty cup. For 50 years, we gave everything we had. We poured ourselves out hoping that someday someone would fill our cup in return. But they never did. They just kept taking until we had nothing left to give. He looked out the window at the sky. Walking away was not giving up. It was recognizing our own worth. We deserve to be with people who see us, who value us, who appreciate what we bring. Yuna nodded slowly. The Council is sending a delegation. They want us to come back. I know. What should we tell them? Taiho smiled sadly. Nothing. We have said everything we needed to say. For 50 years we spoke. Now, let our silence speak for us. The next day, the Council's request for humanity's return was formally delivered to Earth. It was polite and respectful, more respectful than any message they had ever sent before. Earth's response came 1 week later. It was a single line. Your message has been received. Nothing more. No acceptance. No rejection. No negotiation. Just silence. And in that silence, the galaxy finally began to understand what it had lost. Not just technology or medicine or art, but a people who had loved them, who had cared for them, who had given freely without asking for anything in return. A people who had finally decided that their love deserved to go to someone who would return it. 1 year after humanity walked away, a small delegation arrived at the edge of the Sol system. Kira sat in her ship and looked at the stars around her. Somewhere ahead was Earth, the world she had heard so much about but never visited. The Council had finally agreed to send a formal mission, and she had demanded to lead it herself. The ship passed through human space without incident. Border stations scanned them and let them continue. No warships blocked their path. No warnings were issued. Humanity did not treat them as enemies. They treated them as nothing at all. Just travelers passing through. Kira found that more painful than hostility would have been. Her ship landed on Earth on a cool morning. The sky was gray with clouds, and a soft rain fell on the landing pad. She had expected to be met by officials and diplomats. Instead, a single woman waited for her under an umbrella. Ambassador Kira, Yuna said with a polite bow. Welcome to Earth. Kira looked around. Where's Ambassador Taiho? I hope to speak with him. Yuna's expression remained calm. Taiho is no longer an ambassador. He retired 8 months ago. He's a private citizen now. Retired? Kira could not hide her surprise. Taiho had been the face of humanity in the galaxy for 20 years. He served his people for a long time. He earned his rest. Yuna gestured toward a waiting vehicle. He has agreed to meet with you, but not as a representative of Earth, simply as an old friend. If you still wish to see him. Kira nodded quickly. Yes, please. They drove for several hours through the human world. Kira watched through the window with wonder. She had expected to see a planet preparing for war, building weapons, training soldiers. Instead, she saw something else entirely. Children playing in schoolyards. Farmers working in green fields. Artists painting murals on the sides of buildings. People walking through markets, laughing and talking, living their lives. Humanity was not angry. They were not bitter. They had simply moved on. the vehicle stopped in a small coastal village. The houses were simple and beautiful, built from wood and stone. The ocean stretched out to the horizon, gray and endless under the cloudy sky. Taiho was waiting in a garden behind a small house. He looked different than Kira remembered, older, more relaxed. He wore simple clothes and had dirt on his hands from working with the plants. When he saw her, he smiled warmly. "Kira, it's good to see you." She wanted to be professional, to maintain her composure. Instead, she found tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for all of it." Taiho walked over and gently took her hands. "I know, you were always different from the others. I always knew you cared." They walked along the beach together. The rain had stopped, and pale sunlight broke through the clouds. Taiho moved slowly, peacefully, like a man who had finally set down a heavy burden. "I have to ask," Kira said. "Why did you leave the way you did? No anger, no demands, no war, just silence." Taiho thought for a moment before answering. What would anger have accomplished? We could have shouted. We could have threatened. We could have tried to punish the council for how they treated us. But that would have only proved what they already believed, that we were emotional children who could not control ourselves. He picked up a smooth stone from the beach and looked at it. Silence was harder. Silence forced them to sit with the emptiness we left behind, to notice the things we used to do, to feel our absence without being able to blame us for anything. He threw the stone into the waves. Silence was our dignity. It was our way of saying, "We will not beg. We will not fight. We will simply show you what a galaxy without us looks like, and let you decide if that is what you wanted." Kira wiped her eyes. The council is falling apart. The Drath have formed a coalition. They're attacking deeper into council space every week. Without human communications and logistics, we can't coordinate our defense. I know, millions have died. Taiho's face showed sadness, but not guilt. We warned them for years. We offered to help them prepare. They laughed at us. But you could save them now. You could come back and... No. The word was gentle but absolute. We will not save people who refuse to listen to us, who mocked us for trying to protect them, who took our help for 50 years and never once said, "Thank you." They walked in silence for a while. Finally, Taiho spoke again. "We are not isolationist, Kira. We still believe in connection and cooperation. But we have learned an important lesson. Our gifts should go to those who value them." He told her about the coalition of forgotten peoples. Over the past year, humanity had reached out to other species that the council had ignored or dismissed. Small civilizations, new species, the overlooked and the underestimated. "We found each other," Taiho said. "Species who understand what it feels like to be invisible, who appreciate what we bring because they know what it's like to have nothing. We are building something new together, something based on mutual respect and genuine care." He looked at Kira with something like hope. "The North were always kind to us. If your people want to be part of what we're building, you would be welcome." Back at the council, things were getting worse. Aura, the old historian, had released her work to the public. A complete documentary showing humanity's 50 years in the council. Their contributions, their warnings, their rejected proposals, their quiet dignity in the face of constant disrespect. The documentary spread across the galaxy like fire. Citizens on hundreds of worlds watched it. They saw the truth for the first time. They saw how humanity had been treated. They saw the warnings that could have saved lives, ignored and forgotten. The reaction was immediate. Protests erupted on council homeworlds. People demanded accountability. They wanted to know why their leaders had dismissed the species that had given them so much. High Arbiter Velos tried to maintain control, but his authority was crumbling. During an emergency session, a vote of no confidence was called. For the first time in Council history, the High Arbiter was removed from office. Kira was appointed as the interim High Arbiter. It was a position she never wanted, but she accepted it because she knew what needed to be done. Her first act was to issue a formal apology to humanity. She wrote it herself, carefully choosing every word. She acknowledged the Council's failures. She admitted their arrogance and blindness. She did not ask for forgiveness. She knew she had no right to ask for that. She simply said, "We were wrong. We are sorry." The apology was sent to Earth through official channels. Days passed. A week. Then two. Finally, a response came. It was not addressed to the Council. It was addressed to Kira personally. "Dear Kira, we received the Council's apology. We acknowledge it with gratitude. It is a beginning, though only a beginning. Humanity does not hold hatred in our hearts. We are not a vengeful people. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. We hope the Council finds its way through this darkness. We truly do, but we have found our own path now. And we must walk it with respect and hope for your future." Taiho, Kira read the message alone in her office. She understood what it meant. Humanity was not coming back. The door was not completely closed, but it would not open easily. She looked out at the stars and made a silent promise. She would change things. She would make the Council worthy of humanity's trust again. It might take years. It might take generations, but she would try, because she had seen what the galaxy lost when humanity walked away, and she never wanted to feel that emptiness again. 2 years after humanity walked away, the galaxy looked very different. The war with the Drath had been brutal. Thousands of ships destroyed. Millions of lives lost. Entire colonies burned to ash. But slowly, painfully, the Council had pushed back. Without human technology and support, they had been forced to learn, to grow, to become stronger through suffering. Kira, now officially confirmed as High Arbiter, had spent every day working to rebuild. She had implemented the protocols that humanity had proposed years ago. Defense networks, communication systems, emergency response plans. Everything the Council had once dismissed was now law. It was too late to undo the damage. But it was not too late to prevent more. On a quiet afternoon, she sat alone in her office preparing one final message. It would be sent to Earth not as a request, not as an appeal, but simply as an acknowledgement. To the people of Earth, 2 years have passed since you left us. In that time, we have suffered. We have lost. We have been humbled in ways we never imagined possible. But we have also learned. We understand now what we failed to see for 50 years. You gave us everything you had. You protected us, helped us, connected us. You asked for nothing but respect. And we could not even give you that. We do not ask you to return. We have no right to ask. We only want you to know that we understand. We see you now. We see what you were. We see what we lost. The Council will continue its work. We will try to become the civilization you always believed we could be. Perhaps, someday, we will be worthy of your friendship again. Until then, we wish you peace. We wish you happiness. We wish you everything you deserve, with deepest respect and lasting regret. Kira, High Arbiter of the Galactic Council. She sent the message and sat back in her chair. Outside her window, ships moved through space fewer than before, but moving with purpose and coordination. The Council was healing. It would never be the same, but it was alive. Far across the galaxy. In a region of space that had once been ignored, something beautiful was growing. The coalition of forgotten peoples had expanded to 23 member species. They came from all corners of the galaxy's small civilizations. Young species, those who had been dismissed as unimportant by the great powers. And at the center of it all was humanity. Taiho sat in his garden on a warm morning. 2 years of peace had been good to him. His hair was gray now, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held the same quiet strength they always had. Hana arrived just before noon. She was no longer the young analyst he had known. She was a teacher now, running a school where human and alien children learned together. She brought news from across the coalition. The new medical center on Varus Prime opened yesterday, she said, sitting beside him. They named it after you. Taiho shook his head with an embarrassed smile. I told them not to do that. They did it anyway. They said you gave them hope when they had none. Minho arrived next, carrying food for lunch. He had retired from the fleet, but he could not sit still. Now he worked with the Coalition's logistics network, helping move supplies to worlds that needed them. His grandchildren ran ahead of him, laughing and chasing each other through the garden. The convoy reached the outer settlements this morning, Minho reported. Food and medicine delivered on schedule. The Varus were crying with gratitude. They said they never thought anyone would care enough to help them. We know what it feels like to be forgotten, Taiho said. That's why we remember others. Yuna was the last to arrive. She walked slowly now. The years had taken their toll, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She carried a datapad with a message that had just arrived. It's from Kira, she said, handing it to Taiho. He read it in silence. The others watched his face, trying to read his emotions. When he finished, he looked out at the ocean that stretched beyond his garden. What does it say? Hannah asked. It says they understand now. Taiho's voice was soft, thoughtful. It says they see us. It says they're sorry. Do you believe them? Minho asked Tae, who considered the question carefully. I believe Kira. She always had a good heart. The others? I don't know. Words are easy. Change is hard. Will you respond? Taiho nodded slowly. He asked Yuna for paper and a pen. The old way. The human way. He wrote carefully, choosing each word with the same precision he had used for every speech and proposal during his years as ambassador. But this was different. This was personal. Dear Kira, thank you for your message. Thank you for listening, even if it took time. Hearing is hard. Understanding is harder. You have done both, and that means more than you know. Humanity does not hold hatred in its heart. We never did. We left in sorrow, not in anger. And we have found peace in our new home among those who value us. The coalition of forgotten peoples grows stronger every day. We have built something beautiful here, not because we wanted to prove anything to the council, but because we believed in each other. We believed that every being deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. Perhaps our paths will cross again someday. Not as masters and servants, not as elders and children, but as equals. Until then, we wish the council well. We hope you find the strength to become what you could always have been. And Kira, thank you for being our friend. Even when friendship was not easy, even when it cost you something. That is something we will never forget. With hope for the future. Taiho. He sealed the letter and gave it to Yuna to send. Then he turned back to his garden, where his friends and family waited. Minho's grandchildren had found a ball somewhere and were kicking it back and forth. Hannah was laughing at something one of them said. The sun was warm, and the ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and flowers. Do you ever regret it? Hannah asked quietly, sitting beside him again. Leaving, I mean. All those years of work. All those connections. Taiho watched the children play. He thought about the question seriously before answering. No, he finally said. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they never gave us the chance to be partners instead of servants. But leaving? No. We did what we had to do. We stood up for our own dignity. And because we did, we found people who truly appreciate us. He smiled, and for a moment, he looked young again. The garden grows where it is planted, Hannah. We planted ourselves in soil that would not nourish us. Now we have found better ground. And look how we bloom. That evening, Kira received Taiho's response. She read it alone in her office as the stars turned slowly outside her window. When she finished, she did not cry. She had done enough crying. Instead, she felt something else. Something like hope. The door was not open. Trust was not rebuilt. But it was not impossible either. Someday, somehow, the galaxy might heal completely. The Council might earn humanity's respect again. The forgotten peoples might rejoin the greater community. Someday. She looked out at the stars, thinking of Earth somewhere in the distance. A small blue world that had given so much and asked for so little. A people who had walked away without a word and, in doing so, had changed everything. She made another silent promise. She would keep working. She would keep pushing. She would spend whatever years she had left making the galaxy worthy of humanity's return. And somewhere across the darkness, on a small coastal village by an endless sea, an old man tended his garden. His friends were with him. His family was safe. His people were thriving. Humanity had walked away in silence. And in that silence, they had found their voice at last.